So, Rowan, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the size of town when you were mayor, because you talked about annexations where the city goes out to a community and asks them a question of whether or not they'd like to join the city. But the city was much smaller shape and size when you were mayor than it is today.
Basically, before about 19 early 60s, the Issaquah was the valley floor from uh, probably uh, just south of where Newport comes into Front Street, down through Darigold and out to where I-90 in Gilman is now. And it was just a few thousand people. I think it was probably about 4,000 when we moved here in 71. In the 60s is when Raleigh, I think, developed the Squawk Mountain. All the housing up there was annexed into the city. And even then, the county island was about a 200-acre uh, unincorporated area surrounded by the city of Issaquah. And that was along Newport Way over to the Issaquah Creek, and from I think it was Juniper up the front to Sunset. There about 200 acres in there that actually annexed into the city while I was mayor. And that's one of the reasons I think that the Fire District 10 headquarters office building is built there, because it was not in the city at the time. When we moved here, there were two fire departments across the street from each other, our current fire station and the current City Hall South council chambers was the District 10 fire station. And that happened significantly before my arrival here, so probably back in the 40s or 50s. There was some kind of a difference of opinion in the fire department. There had been one split. So Fire District 10 was responsible outside the city, and the city had their own fire department inside the city. When I started as mayor, I think we had two employees, a lieutenant and a firefighter, and a fire chief. And the department was volunteer, totally volunteer. One of the reasons for that, one of the differences between AJ and I, there were a few, I think basically we were similar in philosophy, but there were some key differences. AJ could not abide paying people to sleep. And so he would not pay for a full-time fire department because you're paying people to sleep in the station at night. At some point, you have to bite that bullet, whether you like it or not. You know, we're growing, and too many people are working outside the town, and so we're short of volunteers during the day. So as we grow, particularly as the business area grows downtown, we bought the ladder truck when I was mayor, and because of the growth in the business element. And so it's okay, we have to have a full-time fire department. And so we moved in that direction. So another difference, if I segue here between that AJ and I, AJ did not like car sales because of the number of cars. There's a big car lot full of cars on the thing, and so he was not in favor of car dealerships. But from my standpoint, I don't see a whole lot of difference between a car dealership and a mall parking lot. And on the car dealership, at least the cars are all clean and shiny. So I thought, well, I don't have a problem against, they're a great revenue source, and now we have two car dealerships, and rather successful, I think, along I-90 there. But anyway, back to the fire department. There were two departments, and the District 10 for many years had their courses with where the council chambers are, and then they subsequently moved. I don't know if it was too small or what. They moved over to build their new headquarters, maintenance station off of Newport there, and the station became the old station became a video shop for a while. And I think the back part of it was just empty. And then the city ended up buying it, and we made City Hall South out of it, which worked out very. That was done actually before my time, because we moved into it, I think, in '89 when AJ was mayor. And I thought it was a very successful opportunity. But the differences between the two fire departments were, for a long time, was very difficult, and part of it was because we were volunteer and they were more full time. And when Tony Singleton was the fire chief when I started. Actually, AJ, I think, hired him, and he retired later in my term. I had major health issues, and I hired Jim Rankin, who had came from Oceanside, California. And one of the things I told Jim when I hired him, I said I had one major request for him, and that was to not to solve the fire department issue, but to work the fire department issue. And I thought he did a fantastic job there. In my last year, I spent one night a month with fire district commissioners, just talking about different things. And it's because you have to establish some kind of rapport. And at that time, the district was about 4 times the size of Issaquah. But from a standpoint of agreement, that it has to be equal. Even though there are 4 times as many, we each have 1 vote on whether you decide this thing or not. And it was hard getting to that position, I think, with the district, but we were subsequently able to do that. I would like, going back, would like to have made a couple of changes that I think would have helped. I don't know that I need to go into that. That's kind of new yet. But we did reach a point we were able to combine the departments, join them on one combine. And so now we have Eastside Fire and Rescue. And I'm very proud that Jim was, I think, key to making that happen. And I'm very pleased we were able to do that because I think the public benefits.
So that's a big success to have that happen.
Yes, even though it happened after I think after I finished. But I think my last year with Jim and talking with the commissioners allowed that to happen. So I'm very pleased about that.
So what other successes jump to mind in your first term? It sounds like it was a bit of a tough term.
In my first term?
Bit of a tough term.
I'd say maybe my biggest success in the first term was just surviving. If you look at some of the issues, and what we actually went through and everything. I think I came in, I wanted to change the corporate culture to a flatter organization and, with more collaborative between the departments. And that was not happening at the time. And we were able to do that. I think I was very, very pleased with that. It was very difficult getting it off the ground. That's why I say that's cost us Rita, for example. But I think there were some key people that helped make that happen. And Linda Rooley, I think, when she bought into it, changed everything.
Your city clerk.
City clerk. She was city clerk, longtime city clerk, probably along with Leon, the 2 longest. Well, now Brett Heath is longer, but they were
40 years.
two key people that in the whole city, because they were kind of at the middle of everything. So I was very pleased that we were able to do that. And I think there's probably still some of that. I think we changed the hiring process. Again, as part of that flattening the organization, we involved the employees in the hiring process, which had not been done before. Not just for other employees, but even in hiring the department heads. And I think that was key in in hiring Cheryl and in Jim Rankin, for example. I could not have been more happy with that. We had a couple of other, at least one other department head that was not as successful, and I'll probably just leave it at that.
That's a good legacy, though, Rowan.
It's been a long time ago, and I'm not sure where everybody is at that point and everything else. But we had one department head that was, and later in my term that didn't work out very well. But that doesn't necessarily mean the process was flawed. We're all human; we make mistakes.
That's something you implemented way back then that the city still uses today. So
yes,
I
think they probably still have that, and I think it's because the people on the front line are the ones that interact with the public, and I guess one of the things I thought was important as part of the culture change was to invert the pyramid. We have the pyramid with all the employees and the boss at the top. And I think you invert that and you put the boss at the bottom. And at that time, one of the boss's jobs is to see that all the people above him have the tools to do their job. They know their job. If they don't know their job, that's another issue that you can deal with. But to make that happen. And I think it worked out. I felt it worked, at least in my case, very, very well for the time. But the first 4 years, that was not very visible. Second 4 years, I think it went a lot better. And I think looking back, I could have done a third term. But I felt that 2 terms is the norm, still the norm, I think, and it should be the norm. The strength is bringing people in from our regular jobs to this job. And then you do that for a term, 2 terms. And then you go back and somebody else brings in their strengths and it moves on. But too often it becomes like stale fish, and how do we get rid of this thing? And so I'd rather leave and have people say, gee, we wish you'd stay on, and then say, how do we get rid of this bugger? And so I was very pleased with that. But I think the success that I'm very proud about is bringing the Costco headquarters to town. Mm. And I think that I had as much to do with that as anybody at the time. When they built the Pickering Corporate Park, where the Costco headquarters is now, the whole area had been zoned for commercial, which is buildings, not retail. And they built 3 buildings. This is in the early 90s. And there were 3 buildings, office buildings there. And I think they were all occupied. But the rest of the land there basically remained stagnant, remained vacant, because the market was, at that time, was flat. Issaquah was not seen as a major player, so there wasn't much happening. Excuse me. And so in about 93, 94, the question arose is, what do? We wait till the market comes back, or do we make a change? And so I felt it was important not to leave the land vacant. So we changed the zoning to allow retail. And of course, it already had the commercial zoning with the buildings. And subsequently, actually during that whole process, Costco had been talking to the city about putting a store in town. And they wanted to put it where the Target complex is now. And that was not felt to be a very good place for it because of all the traffic that was generated. I think at that time, it might have been before or after we put Maple Street through. So we did not agree to let them put the Costco store there. There was no talk about the headquarters, which was in Kirkland at the time, which is why that's Kirkland Signature brand, because they were in Kirkland. They were leasing, I think, but about a mile or a mile and a half from the store. Mr. Brotman, who was the chairman of the board, felt it was important that they have the headquarters next to a store because they wanted to have the office people in the store at least once a day. So they recognize that it's the store that's important, not the office. Too often it's the office, even in the city the same way, it's the office. It's not the office. It's where you're actually dealing with the public. In this case, it's the store that's important. And I remember spending salmon days in about 95, I guess, a Sunday afternoon with Jeff Brotman walking around salmon days, talking about what was important to Costco and what was important to the city and various soft issue things like that. And subsequently, they moved the headquarters there, built the store across the street from it on Southeast 56th, and didn't have the gas station at that time. But as I say, the rest is history, and I'm very proud to have been a part of that because I think it's a great addition to the city of Issaquah.
So I want to talk, those are great successes, by the way. I want you to weigh in a little bit on what the challenges were during your term.
One of the biggest challenge, I'm not sure there was a biggest challenge other than myself and who I am as a person, because that's, from my standpoint, that's, we create our own problems, and it's the opportunity to see how we impact that and how we are impacted by ourselves. Retrospect, introspect, I suppose, is very important to that process. Then I always thought one of the biggest challenges was personnel issues, because you're dealing with people, and we are very complex. And I think, for example, the issue with Rita was an example of that. Looking back, I don't regret what I use I and we interchangeably, I guess. What we did, what was done, but I do feel strongly that I could have done it differently. Could have been improved, but when you're in the heat of the moment, when you're up to in alligators, you forget your intent to drain the swamp, not to fight the alligators. And so when you're dealing with people, you have those personalities, and it's hard, particularly at that time as a part-time mayor. Even though Leon was the man in the middle of it 24/7, basically, I was the one that made the decision. I feel very sure that Leon was very careful in how he managed that. That I made the decisions, because I'm sure that Leon probably would have done some things differently. But personnel issues are always difficult, and I think part of it is because you don't have any small issues. You immediately go from no problem to a big problem, and it's, again, depends on the personality of the people involved. So personnel issues are always difficult. Another one would be, I think, in changing the corporate culture, and the corporate there being the city of Issaquah, because change is always difficult. They say the only person that likes change is a baby with a wet diaper, and that's probably not all that bad, not wrong. And when you're looking at that time, we were, I think, about 150 to 200 employees, pretty good size number of employees, and it's a big issue. And I could have done that differently, but again, you learn on the job, and I'm very pleased. I think it was the right thing to do. Could have been done better. But you don't have those opportunities at the time. You only know what the right answer was when you look back at the time. I think a couple of things about me. For example, I think because that is important as a person in that position, that I felt I have a hard time staying focused. I see myself as a generalist rather than a specialist, which means I guess I see something like something that's this wide and that deep as opposed to this wide and that deep. And so because of that, I think I have a hard time staying focused on what is important. And that's on me. And the other part of it is my personality. I'm an Aquarius. Uh, I'm not a big believer in astrology, not astronomy, astrology, but I think there is something there. And because I'm an Aquarius, I see myself as, I think, as easygoing, not quick to anger. And along with that, I think verbally, I'm not very quick on my feet. When somebody says something, I don't respond. I don't have a quick retort to answer that. And so that creates issues. And so I think you need to be aware of those things. And one of the things I was really pleased about Cheryl Famble's is her personality and view was very different than Leon and I. Leon is also an Aquarius. I think his birthday is 2 days before mine. And so I've always felt that we were very similar in a lot of how we saw things. And so I needed somebody to counteract that. And I thought Cheryl was almost perfect in that regard. I could not have been more pleased with how that whole thing worked out. That she balanced Leon and I. And I think the whole thing functioned a lot better after she came on board because of that. So, but it was a challenge going into that. I think it worked out well.